Good afternoon, everybody. It is Friday the 19th, I believe. I got it right. Friday the 19th of February. So welcome to our Friday recap live, everybody. I'm Michelle Beckett, and as ever, I'm joined by the wonderful Stephanie Camilleri, and together we make both halves of ADHD Unlocked. And this week we have been grappling with quite a difficult and emotive subject, and one that causes a lot of adults with ADHD a fair few problems, and that is communicating your ADHD at work, whether you should, when is the right time to do so, whether you need to, how to do it, and what the consequences of that will be and why. So it's quite difficult because there's a lot of people with ADHD, because of the stigma and misunderstanding, have had huge problems in the workplace trying to communicate their ADHD challenges, haven't they, Steph?
Yeah, it's a really difficult because because of all the ADHD challenges, but particularly around rejection, sensitive dysphoria, and difficulties communicating. So this topic, communicating your ADHD at work, unfortunately, all the ADHD challenges very much go against the employee with ADHD when they need to sometimes justify, their performance. Because even just feedback can sometimes trigger an ADHD into RSD, and then it spirals because it affects performance. So yeah, it's a real issue. Too many very talented employees with ADHD just aren't able to stay in employment, and it's not just bad for them, but obviously the organizations, society as a whole, really, right? It's a real issue.
Yeah, and we're so much more likely to be underemployed or be out of work or change jobs or to set up on our own business, really set up on our own, because of the difficulties that we have in the workplace and trying to conform and feeling like we're those square pegs in round holes. Really, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, a lot of the members, when we had our members meet up, some of the stories, there was one of our members been out of the workplace for about 10 years. And she kind of told us the story about what happened. And I mean, the stigma is still there with ADHD. But you can imagine 10 years ago what it was like. And she really suffered. So many employees with ADHD end up on sick leave, having to, extended sick leave, and then obviously having to sometimes never return, because what I've seen with some of my clients, they go back into the workplace, and because ADHD is not understood, their whole role has been kind of redesigned, but in the worst possible way. Because yeah, it's like, okay, well, okay, you obviously got sick because of your ADHD, so let's maybe give you something menial or something that's not very interesting to you whatsoever. And obviously that's then going to set the employee with ADHD up for failure, because then they're going to maybe struggle to perform because these tasks just aren't interesting, or they're not able to contribute. And it's really important for ADHDers to feel like they're adding value. That's what motivates us to do our best, to keep going. And particularly what can be difficult is if you've got a manager that isn't very sympathetic, or maybe even intimidated by you and your performance, your ideas, then that's when the real trouble I've seen starts with employees that work under those kind of managers.
Yeah, because that's something that's not very often discussed, is it, Steph? Is that the manager might be, a dull and boring, quite ordinary, plodding type person, and then faced with an enthusiastic ADHDer full of ideas who wants to challenge them, because we naturally challenge systems and processes that we think we can improve upon. They will see that as possibly a threat to their job. So that needs to be taken into consideration when you're thinking about communicating your ADHD at work. It's not all about you, because we tend to internalize everything, don't we, and blame ourselves. Oh, it's me and my failure, because that's the messages that we've had all of our lives. However, it might be that we're just so shiny, we're a bit of a threat, possibly.
Yeah, that it definitely is a big part of it, I think, and from what I've seen as well. Because yeah, the ADHD brain, right? You've got innovation. You can maybe some ADHDers can literally, they're like the canary in the mine. And so maybe a manager puts forward something, this is what you should do, or this is the way we do it. And the ADHD can see what's going to happen, that they're heading literally, this will mean that there'll be a crash, but they can't articulate it. Or what I've seen with clients, they have difficulty explaining the steps between, you know, the end, the destination. And so they can't justify it. So then they're then forced to kind of proceed with that action that they know is going to end up in a train wreck. And a lot of them just can't do it, or refuse to do it. So the communication really gets in the way, which is why after last week, when Michelle was talking about disclosing ADHD and how to do that successfully, like in a more general context, we decided to continue the theme on a very, you know, very much needed area for communicating your ADHD at work if you do decide to do that. And we talked about the different factors that you do need to consider if you are going to make that disclosure.
So it's a bit of a conundrum, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you're protected if you disclose your ADHD at work from disability discrimination, potentially, although, you know, we can, you know, we have had some problems there, which we can discuss. But on the other hand, you may face prejudice and discrimination, misunderstanding. So under what circumstances do you need to strike that balance, Steph? What should form part of your decision making in terms of whether or not you should disclose in the workplace?
Yeah, it's a risk assessment kind of needs to be made. And definitely what you were saying before, Mish, about the manager yeah, you've got to be realistic about that as well. Because, you know, if sometimes disclosure will mean it might give the manager justification for monitoring you more closely. And I've seen this go really wrong for some of my clients. And what happens is that it starts interfering. They can't do their jobs because the manager's like, no, come along now, you know, you've got to take your break, or, you know, making them kind of stop when, and we know that, you know, for us to have to stop midway in something, it's really hard to pick it up again. So that then just increases the anxiety and the frustration, and then that's going to affect performance. And yeah, before you know it, all these kind of adjustments that are being made for the employee have actually turned out to be to spiral the problems. And yeah, it's really difficult because it's really difficult for the ADHD to explain what's happened. Sometimes employees with ADHD, they can't even explain what their challenges are, or they don't even know what they are. So I mean, how can you tell your employer what you need if you don't even know what you need? You don't know what the challenges are. And often the ADHD is so overwhelmed and so emotionally dysregulated because of RSD, there's just no capacity. They can't do that. They just can't do it.
No. And I think this is the thing, it's the stigma attached to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And one of our members has just written in the Facebook group, ADHD spells assumed disorderly, hyper and ditzy, which I love. And that's part of the stigma, isn't it? They assume that you're hyper, they assume that you're disorderly, and they assume that you're ditzy. So this is the problem, is that we need education here.
Massively.
We need education, and somebody's just said we need organizations to maybe have a badge to say that they respect neurodiversity, and not just as it relates to autism or dyslexia, but they understand ADHD too. Yeah. So it is all about education because of this stigma, but we have such a long way to go.
We really do. I mean, the stories that I'm getting from some of my employees, and the pain, like I posted in LinkedIn actually, it was last night, because one of my clients was just struggling and didn't know what to do. She's trying to get support, and this is with my help, right? So this is someone that's actually, you know, benefiting from some extra support, but is just finding herself just literally knocking her head against the wall because of all the red tape, you know, all the kind of, it's not easy to like get help, even through Access to Work. Access to Work is a fantastic resource and great support. But as some of our members have said, and we know kind of firsthand, in order to get access to work, you need access to work.
Yeah.
Not very helpful.
As we know, because it's not, the process isn't geared up for our brains. So I think probably needing those accommodations and support from Access to Work would be one of the decision-making factors. And if you've had a negative performance review, or they think one might be coming up and you've got challenges in the workplace, would that be some of the tick boxes to say, right, it's time to disclose, I can't, you know, I need to protect myself here?
That's it. I think it is when you need to protect yourself, basically. I know, and I wish it wasn't the case. I really do. But from what I've seen, yeah, because disclosure can start creating, start putting like a spotlight on these issues, our ADHD challenges that were never brought up really before. Like I've literally seen one of my clients who's an employee, their kind of performance review, pre-disclosure and then post-disclosure. And yeah, it's just littered with all the ADHD challenges as the problem, obviously not stated in that way and acknowledged in that way, but just being literally hit over the head with these challenges that weren't raised before. And again, so that's just not going to help the ADHD. It's just going to, again, make them completely more RSD, feel more hopeless, feel like they're more under attack, feel more emotionally dysregulated, so they can't protect themselves. It's terrible. It's really a terrible place to be in.
I think the way that performance reviews are set up, and I was speaking to an adult with ADHD this week who said that they literally, the brain shuts down. They don't even listen to performance review because their RSD is so great that they just go, I can't even listen. So it doesn't even go in. It just goes in one ear and out the other because my brain just doesn't want to get hurt by what it is, even if it's going to be positive. They just shut it out. So I think we almost need support in the workplace alongside a performance review because of our challenges just with how we receive that information. So that's difficult in itself, but it is, we are at a really early stage of understanding, aren't we? And a lot of places, some are good, and we have heard some stories where workplaces are very, very supportive and they've done all of they can. And, you know, I've been in and done training for organizations where they've got an ADHD employee there because they've been so keen to learn about it and how can we support them. And they've been absolutely brilliant. However, other workplaces are just, I don't know how to deal with this.
Yeah, certain industries, I guess, but yeah, certain workplaces. But it's when you can, if you've got a manager that is open to understanding and you think they'll be open to understanding and you know that you could really benefit from some of the support disclosing ADHD brings, as in like access to work, obviously, other kind of reasonable adjustments, then yeah, you by communicating it in the right way, then it's probably worth doing. And Michelle kind of stepped that through for everyone last week, which was going to be really helpful. So definitely using that information and arming yourself with that if you are going to disclose is a good idea. But you definitely want to have the manager on board. Something that I've realized recently, given all these employees with ADHD struggling in the workplace, is that they can be, you know, I can coach them and I can give them all the strategies in the world. They can have all the understanding in the world and know what they need. But if they don't have the managers, if the workplace isn't on board, because of the RSD, it's all for naught, because they spiral. As soon as the RSD triggers, all the great stuff from coaching, you know, as you said, Misha, just because they literally freeze, they blank. And, you know, some employees, they talk about like just crying through these meetings, can't stop crying. And that's just like, yeah, I mean, it really upsets me, obviously upsets all of us, but, you know, because, you know, you try and help them move forward and you know what they're capable of and they're brilliant, like doctors, lawyers, and just generally. And, but what they're having to face and just having to spend all that energy, what little energy they've got left because they're just struggling, you know, there's nothing in the tank just to protect themselves. And it's,
so, I mean, this is an interesting point that one of our members, Carol, has just raised. At her employer, she started using declare instead of disclose. And she says she thinks disclose sounds like a confession, whereas declare sounds less loaded. I would agree, actually. I declare, it sounds more proud. So thank you for that. And as Gemma's just pointing out, the diversity and inclusion departments in the larger organisations need to extend to properly include neurodiversity, not just pay lip service to autism, as a lot of them do, autism and dyslexia. So when you think neurodiversity, a large organisation often just thinks autism because they're way ahead in terms of the acceptance work. We've got a lot of catching up to do with ADHD. But what I think is if we did start at these large organisations, it would filter down to smaller organizations. It would become commonplace, it would become acceptable. And, you know, there's been a lot of work on all sorts of diversity issues, you know, with women, with LGBT people over the years, in terms of, well, that's not acceptable anymore. We need to get to that place where it's not acceptable to treat our employees like this.
It's not.
Yeah. if anybody's having any trouble in the workplace, get in touch with Steph and I, and we'll see what we can do to train your employer so that we can make the workplace better for you.
Yeah, and there was something that you mentioned too, Mish, last week, and a really a good reason to disclose. If you are one of the ADHDers that are actually thriving,
Yes,
thriving, yeah, and particularly if you're senior, right, and you can, so you've got some kind of sway and influence, disclose. Michelle was saying, yeah, be a pioneer, help for the cause. So yeah, Mish, anything more you wanted to say on that?
yeah, I forgot that I'd said that last week. Actually, it's a really good point. So if you're struggling and you're having problems with performance, and the workplace is a really difficult place to be, and it's really affecting your mental health, then it's time to disclose, to get the support you need through Access to Work and get changes made to accommodate your neurodiversity. But it'd be great in terms of ADHD advocacy if you're doing brilliantly and they go, that's because of my ADHD. Oh, you're so great. That's because of my ADHD. Let's write a blog for the company website, whatever, because of my ADHD. This is why I'm so successful. So declare if you're doing brilliantly, or at the opposite end, if things are difficult for you. And then I think we'll start to make these changes. But we've a long way to go. So bear with us, but anything we can do to help train your employers. And go back to last week and how to communicate your ADHD, and how to set people up psychologically will really help you if you need to disclose. And I know it's controversial because some people say definitely disclose, some people say definitely not. But we think, Steph and I, don't we, that this is the way to assess the situation.
Yeah. So yeah, because we covered we've covered ADHD at work and ADHD Unlocked. So this week I did encourage members to revisit the ADHD at Work week, where we've done a webinar on explaining kind of the ADHD challenges at work and the superpowers as well, and kind of how to frame it. Communication week, because this is definitely one of those crucial conversations when you declare. Start using that word. Thank you. Declare your ADHD, and obviously last week explaining your ADHD. So, and rejection sensitive dysphoria week is another one, because yeah, there's a lot of challenges we have to overcome just to do this. So if you haven't yet watched those webinars, guys, go and revisit. And yeah, again, any comments, any additions, let us know.
But it may be you're just in entirely the wrong job and career, which leads us nicely on to next week's topic, Steph.
Yes, so kind of choosing the right career for you when you have ADHD. So we're covering that next week, and we've got actually one of our members who is a bit of a career specialist, was working in career advisory, is going to be running that webinar with us. So do join if you're at that juncture, or you'll realize now after this little recap that maybe you do need to reconsider your options. And yeah, would love to see you there.
Yeah, so if you do want to join and not yet a member, go to members.adhdunlock.co.uk/shop. And you can join us. But thank you so much, everybody. This is a difficult topic. But as I say, go back over the topics that Steph has just reminded us of, and it will go a long way towards really helping you feel confident in declaring, I nearly said disclosing, declaring proudly your ADHD at work so you can get the help you need. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Steph. And we will see you next week for careers. So take care, stay safe, everybody. And don't forget to rest this weekend and top up your tanks. So we'll see you soon. Bye. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.